They mocked Captain Sophia Harper for being too weak to handle F-35G forces. But when enemy bombers broke through air defenses and targeted Los Angeles City, she was about to prove that physical strength has nothing to do with the will to protect 8 million innocent lives. Meet Captain Sophia Harper, 28 years old, 5 feet 4 inches tall, weighing 125 pounds, soaking wet, with piercing blue eyes that held more determination than men twice her size, and a quiet voice that somehow commanded respect from everyone except her fellow fighter pilots. She'd graduated top of her class from the Air Force Academy, earned her wings with distinction, and completed advanced F-35 Lightning II training with flying colors. But none of that mattered to the squadron of alpha males at Edwards Air Force Base who saw only a small woman trying to play in a big man's game. The problem wasn't her flying skills. Everyone acknowledged that Sophia could make an F-35 dance through the sky like a deadly butterfly. The problem was what happened when that butterfly had to pull 9 Gs in a combat turn while wearing 40 pounds of survival gear and fighting for consciousness against forces that wanted to squeeze the life out of her body. During high-G training exercises, Sophia would occasionally gray out, that terrifying moment when G-forces drain blood from your brain and the world starts to fade around the edges. While her male counterparts seemed to shrug off 8 or 9 Gs like it was nothing, Sophia had to fight tooth and nail to maintain consciousness during extreme maneuvers. "Look, Harper," Major David Mason had told her after a particularly challenging training session where she'd momentarily lost consciousness during a 9G pull. "This isn't about gender equality or political correctness. This is about physics. Fighter combat requires pulling Gs that would kill most people. If you can't handle the physical demands, you're a liability to your wingman and the mission." Sophia had heard variations of that speech dozens of times. Captain Mark Foster called her Blackout Betty behind her back. Captain James Wright made jokes about installing a cushioned ejection seat for delicate pilots. Even some of the ground crew whispered that she'd never make it through a real dogfight. But Sophia knew something they didn't. The grayouts weren't happening because she was weak. They were happening because she was learning. Every pilot's body responds differently to G-forces, and Sophia had been developing techniques to compensate for her smaller frame and lower blood volume. She'd been working with flight surgeons to understand the physiology, practicing breathing techniques that helped maintain blood flow to her brain, and most importantly, learning to anticipate and work with her body's responses rather than fighting against them. What her critics saw as weakness, Sophia understood as adaptation. Her chance to prove them wrong came on a Tuesday morning in October when the world changed in 30 seconds. Sophia was in the pilot's lounge at Edwards Air Force Base, studying weather reports for a routine training flight when every alarm in the building started screaming simultaneously. The base's emergency action system activated with a bone-chilling announcement: "All pilots to immediate alert status. This is not a drill. Unidentified aircraft have penetrated United States airspace and are approaching the western seaboard. All F-35 pilots report to aircraft immediately." Sophia's blood went cold. Unidentified aircraft approaching the western seaboard meant only one thing: someone was attacking American soil. She ran to the flight line where organized chaos was erupting. Ground crews were frantically preparing F-35 Lightning II fighters for immediate launch. The sleek, angular aircraft looked like something from science fiction, all stealth technology and cutting-edge avionics designed to dominate any airspace on Earth. Colonel Jennifer Blake, the squadron commander, was briefing pilots as they arrived. "Listen up!" At approximately 0900 hours, 12 unidentified aircraft crossed into our airspace from international waters. They've ignored all radio communications and are maintaining course directly toward Los Angeles. Initial assessment suggests they're heavy bombers, possibly carrying conventional or unconventional ordnance. Sophia felt her stomach drop. 12 bombers heading for Los Angeles meant millions of lives at risk. "Our primary mission is to intercept and identify these aircraft. If they do not respond to warnings and change course, we are authorized to engage. Time is critical. The bogies will reach Los Angeles in approximately 18 minutes. Colonel Blake began assigning pilots to aircraft. Mason, Foster, Wright, your Alpha Flight. Harper, your— "Ma'am," Major Mason interrupted, "maybe Harper should stay on standby. This mission requires maximum G tolerance, and we can't afford to have a pilot black out during combat maneuvers." Sophia felt every eye in the briefing room turn toward her. This was it, the moment that would define her entire career. She could accept the sideline role and watch while others defended her country, or she could fight for the chance to prove that heart matters more than height. "Colonel," Sophia said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins, "I request permission to fly this mission. My aircraft is prepped and ready." Colonel Blake looked at her for a long moment. As a female pilot herself, she understood the challenges Sophia faced. "Harper, this isn't training. These are real bogies with real weapons heading for real targets. Are you certain you can handle the physical demands?" "Ma'am, I've never been more certain of anything in my life," Blake nodded. "You're Beta Flight Leader. Take F-35 tail number 015. Your call sign for this mission is Guardian." Sophia sprinted to her aircraft, where Sergeant Rodriguez was completing final checks. "She's ready to fly, Captain. Full fuel, full weapons load, all systems green." Sophia climbed into the cockpit of the F-35 and immediately felt the familiar embrace of the most advanced fighter aircraft ever built. The cockpit was a marvel of technology. Heads-up displays, touchscreen controls, and sensor systems that could track targets hundreds of miles away. But most importantly, it was equipped with a G-suit system designed to help pilots maintain consciousness during extreme maneuvers. As she strapped in, Sophia could hear radio chatter from the other pilots. "This is ridiculous. She's going to pass out the first time we have to pull hard Gs. I hope she doesn't get us all killed." Sophia blocked out the negativity and focused on her pre-flight checklist. She'd trained for this moment her entire career. Every simulator session, every training flight, every moment of doubt and criticism had led to this mission. "Guardian Tower, you are cleared for immediate takeoff. Vector 270, climb to 30,000 feet. Bogies are currently 200 miles west of your position, heading 090 at 500 knots. Sophia advanced the throttle and felt the F-35's Pratt & Whitney F-135 engine push her back into her seat with 43,000 pounds of thrust. The aircraft accelerated down the runway like a bullet, lifting off with the grace of a bird and the power of a rocket. As she climbed through 20,000 feet, her radar began painting targets. 12 aircraft in tight formation, definitely military bombers based on their size and flight characteristics. They were heading directly toward Los Angeles with the kind of determination that suggested a carefully planned attack. "All flights, this is Guardian. I have visual confirmation of 12 heavy bombers. Appears to be foreign design, possibly Tupolev Tu-160s. They're maintaining course for Los Angeles and showing no signs of responding to radio calls." Colonel Blake's voice crackled over the radio from the command center. "Guardian, you are authorized to attempt radio contact. If they do not respond and change course, you are cleared to engage." Sophia switched to the international emergency frequency. "Unknown aircraft heading toward Los Angeles airspace. This is United States Air Force Captain Harper. You have entered restricted airspace without authorization. Change course immediately or you will be fired upon." Silence. She tried again in multiple languages, following protocol for dealing with potentially hostile aircraft. Still no response. "All flights, Guardian. Bogies are not responding to communications and are maintaining attack course. ETA to Los Angeles is now 12 minutes. That's when Sophia's radar lit up with new contacts. The bombers had just launched escort fighters, at least 8 of them, probably Su-57s based on their radar signature. The enemy had planned this attack carefully, sending bombers to destroy targets while fighters provided protection. "Guardian, Alpha Leader, we've got company. 8 fighters just separated from the bomber formation and are vectoring toward us." Sophia's heart rate spiked, but her mind remained clear. This was exactly the scenario they'd trained for, except now it was real. Real missiles, real bullets, real lives hanging in the balance. Alpha Flight, engage the fighters. Beta Flight, we're going after the bombers. Beta Flight was just Sophia. She was alone against 12 heavy bombers loaded with enough ordnance to level city blocks. The first enemy fighter locked onto Sophia's aircraft, and her threat warning system began screaming. A missile was inbound. Guardian has incoming missile, breaking left. Sophia threw the F-35 into a violent evasive maneuver, pulling 7 Gs as she tried to defeat the incoming threat. The world grayed around the edges, but she maintained consciousness through pure determination and the breathing techniques she'd practiced thousands of times. The missile missed, confused by the F-35's stealth characteristics and electronic countermeasures. But now, Sophia was in the middle of a furball. Multiple enemy fighters trying to kill her while she attempted to reach the bombers before they could strike Los Angeles. An enemy Su-57 appeared in her heads-up display, lined up for a perfect shot. Sophia didn't hesitate. She squeezed the trigger, and an AIM-120 AMRAAM missile streaked away from her aircraft. The enemy fighter tried to evade, but the missile's guidance system was relentless. Contact. Guardian, splash 1 enemy fighter. But there were still 7 fighters and 12 bombers, and Los Angeles was only 8 minutes away. Sophia dove toward the bomber formation, pulling negative Gs that made her feel like her body was being turned inside out. 2 more enemy fighters moved to intercept her, firing missiles that forced her into another series of extreme maneuvers. This time, she pulled 8.5 Gs in a climbing turn that should have knocked her unconscious. The world darkened around the edges. Her vision tunneled, and for a moment she felt consciousness slipping away. But she'd trained for this exact moment. Instead of fighting the G-forces, she worked with them, using her breathing techniques and mental preparation to maintain just enough awareness to keep flying. When her vision cleared, she was perfectly positioned behind the lead bomber. Target locked, she whispered, and fired. The AIM-120 missile covered the distance in seconds, striking the bomber's left engine. The massive aircraft began trailing smoke and flame, but it was still flying toward the city. Sophia lined up for another shot, but 2 enemy fighters were closing on her position. She had to choose: continue attacking the bombers and risk being shot down, or evade the fighters and let the bombers reach their targets. There was no choice. 8 million people were counting on her. She fired her second missile at the same bomber, ensuring its destruction, then immediately broke hard right to avoid incoming fire from the pursuing fighters. The maneuver pulled 9.2 Gs, more than she'd ever experienced in training. This time, she did gray out. For 3 terrifying seconds, Sophia Harper lost consciousness while flying an F-35 Lightning II at 600 miles per hour in the middle of a dogfight. But 3 seconds later, she was back. Her body had adapted. The months of training, the breathing techniques, the mental preparation, it had all worked. She'd survived a 9.2 G maneuver and remained combat effective. Guardian is still in the fight, she reported, her voice steady despite what she'd just experienced. Over the next 6 minutes, Sophia Harper flew the mission of her life. She outmaneuvered enemy fighters that should have been able to kill her, survived G-forces that should have knocked her unconscious, and systematically eliminated bomber after bomber as they approached Los Angeles. When an enemy fighter got a missile lock on her, she pulled a 9.5 G evasive maneuver that allowed her to reverse positions and destroy her attacker with guns. When 2 bombers tried to separate and attack different targets, she split her attention between them, destroying one with missiles and the other with her 25mm cannon. When her own missiles ran low, she used her superior maneuverability to get close enough for gun kills, flying her F-35 like a World War II dogfighter, despite the incredible speeds and G-forces involved. The 4th bomber fell to her guns as it approached the Los Angeles harbor. The 5th exploded in a ball of fire when her missile found its fuel tanks. The 6th tried to evade by diving toward the ocean, but Sophia followed it down, pulling sustained 8G turns that would have incapacitated most pilots. Each engagement pushed her body to its limits and beyond. At 9.7 Gs, she momentarily lost peripheral vision, but maintained enough awareness to keep fighting. At 10.1 Gs during a defensive spiral, she experienced complete gray out for 4 seconds, but recovered in time to avoid an enemy missile. Her body was learning, adapting, becoming something beyond what the training manual said was possible for someone her size. The seventh bomber was attempting to reach downtown Los Angeles when Sophia intercepted it just 5 miles from the coast. Her final AEM-120 missile struck it dead center, sending debris raining into the Pacific Ocean instead of onto innocent civilians. But she wasn't done. 3 bombers remained, and they had spread out to attack multiple targets across the sprawling metropolis. Sophia engaged the 8th bomber as it approached LAX airport. With no missiles remaining, she closed to guns range and fired a sustained burst from her 25mm cannon. The bomber's right wing erupted in flames, and the massive aircraft spiraled into the ocean. The 9th bomber was heading for the downtown financial district. Sophia caught it just as it began its attack run, her cannon fire severing the aircraft's tail section. It crashed into an empty parking lot instead of the packed office buildings it had been targeting. 2 bombers left. Her fuel was running low, her ammunition was nearly exhausted, but Sophia refused to quit. The 10th bomber was approaching the port of Los Angeles, probably targeting the massive oil refineries that could create a fireball visible from space. Sophia used her last cannon rounds to destroy its bombing systems, forcing it to crash harmlessly into the ocean. 1 bomber remained, the largest of the formation, heading directly for downtown Los Angeles with what appeared to be a massive conventional warhead. Sophia had no missiles, no cannon ammunition, and barely enough fuel to make it back to base. But she had 1 weapon left: her aircraft itself. She positioned her F-35 directly above the final bomber and began a controlled descent, using her aircraft's superior maneuverability to stay in the bomber's blind spot. The enemy crew had no idea she was there until the last second. Sophia struck the bomber's tail section with her F-35's landing gear, damaging both aircraft, but sending the bomber into an unrecoverable dive. She managed to regain control of her own fighter just in time to watch the final threat disappear into the Pacific Ocean. By the time the last enemy aircraft fell into the Pacific Ocean, Sophia had destroyed 12 bombers and 4 fighters single-handedly. The remaining enemy fighters had either been shot down by Alpha Flight or had fled back toward international waters. Los Angeles was safe. Guardian, Tower, outstanding work. You are cleared to return to base. Sophia's hands were shaking as she flew back to Edwards Air Force Base. She'd just experienced combat G-forces that exceeded anything in training, survived the most intense aerial battle since World War II, and saved millions of lives. When she landed, the entire squadron was waiting on the flight line. As she climbed out of her aircraft, Major Mason was the first to approach her. "Harper," he said, his voice filled with something that hadn't been there before: respect. "I owe you an apology. Hell, we all do. What you did up there, I've never seen flying like that." Captain Foster, who had called her Blackout Betty, stepped forward next. "Sophia, you just redefined what it means to be a fighter pilot. You didn't just handle the G-forces, you mastered them." Colonel Blake appeared with a group of Pentagon officials who had flown in to debrief the mission. "Captain Harper, preliminary analysis suggests you engaged and destroyed 12 enemy bombers and 4 fighters while sustaining combat maneuvers exceeding 10 Gs. How did you maintain consciousness during those extreme G-forces?" Sophia thought about her answer. She could have talked about training techniques, breathing methods, or physical conditioning. Instead, she told the truth. "Ma'am, when 8 million innocent people are depending on you, you find a way to stay conscious. The G-forces didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was stopping those bombers." One of the Pentagon officials stepped forward. "Captain Harper, we've been monitoring your flight data throughout the engagement. What you accomplished today was beyond the theoretical limits of human G-tolerance. You've proven that determination and proper training can overcome supposed physical limitations." 6 months later, Captain Sophia Harper stood in the Rose Garden of the White House, receiving the Medal of Honor from the President of the United States. The citation read, "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity, at the risk of her life above and beyond the call of duty, while serving as pilot of an F-35 Lightning II fighter aircraft during aerial combat operations that prevented a catastrophic attack on American civilians." But Sophia's greatest satisfaction came from the letter she received the following week from the Air Force Academy. They were implementing new G-tolerance training protocols based on her techniques, and they wanted her to help develop the curriculum for the next generation of fighter pilots. The program would be called Adaptive G-Force Management, teaching pilots to work with their body's natural responses instead of trying to overcome them through brute force. For the first time in aviation history, smaller pilots wouldn't be automatically excluded from fighter aircraft assignments. Sophia Harper had proven that courage, determination, and proper technique could overcome any physical limitation. The woman who was told she was too weak for G-forces had redefined what strength means in aerial combat. She'd shown that the most important muscle for a fighter pilot isn't in their arms or legs, it's in their heart. 2 years later, Major Sophia Harper was selected to lead the Air Force's first mixed-gender aerobatic demonstration team. When reporters asked her about overcoming the criticism she'd faced early in her career, she always gave the same answer. The people who doubted me weren't wrong about the challenges I faced. They were wrong about thinking those challenges couldn't be overcome. Every pilot has limitations, physical, mental, or emotional. The question isn't whether you have limitations. The question is whether you'll let those limitations define what's possible. Sophia looked up at the sky where F-35s were practicing formation flying, their sleek forms cutting through clouds like silver arrows. When I was struggling with G-forces in training, I thought my body was failing me. It took almost losing consciousness in combat to realize that my body was actually teaching me. It was showing me how to adapt, how to find strength I didn't know I had. She paused, remembering that terrifying moment when consciousness slipped away at 9.2 Gs, and the even more amazing moment when it returned. Sometimes what looks like weakness is actually preparation for strength, and sometimes the people who doubt you the most are the ones who need to see what's possible when someone refuses to accept limitations. The small woman who was too weak for G-forces had become the strongest pilot in the Air Force. Not because she could lift more weight or run faster, but because she'd learned that true strength comes from refusing to quit when everything depends on your success. And in the skies above Edwards Air Force Base, a new generation of pilots was learning that lesson every day. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, you can subscribe to see more incredible stories like this one.